titled Enlightened Thought. We invite you to share your thoughts, questions and insights with us as we embark together on the journey with the Quran in 30 nights. Welcome to our second night in the blessed month of Ramadan. On behalf of my team, I would like to send our sincere prayers to you and your families and to humanity as a whole on this blessed month, in hope that we will all grow together spiritually, intellectually and morally stronger out of this experience, inshallah. As we promised, we will not fly in on a theological helicopter, but begin down in the deep sociological valley of everyday life with preparation. This means that first of all, what is necessary for us is both intellectual humility as well as an attentive heart. As Muhammad Iqbal, the great Muslim mind of the 20th century, reminds us, my father, he says, used to say to me, يا بني اقرأ القرآن كأنه يتنزل عليك. My dear son, read the Quran as if it was specifically sent down to you. The program for tonight will look like this. In part 1, I will present on the passages that relate to the human creation in the context of Adam and Eve. In part 2 of part 1, Dr. Hassan Lami will present about Ibrahim alayhi salam in Surah Al-Baqarah. And part 2 of our program, I will present about As-Safa wal-Marwa in the context of Hajar alayhi salam. And Brother Hassan in part 2 will present about the notion of moral compass and goodness. Let us begin our program with the first recitation of the first part by Sheikh Muhammad Al-Dihnawi.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذ قال ربك للملائكة إني جاعل في الأرض خليفة قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك قال إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون وعلم آدم الأسماء كلها ثم عرضهم على الملائكة فقال أنبئوني بأسماء هؤلاء إن كنتم صادقين قالوا سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم قال يا آدم أنبئهم بأسمائهم فلما أنباهم بأسمائهم قال ألم أقل لكم إني أعلم غيب السماوات والأرض وأعلم ما تبدون وما كنتم تكتمون صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
Let us begin with قال إني جاعل في الأرض خليفة. What does it mean to reflect on these existential passages of the Quran in the context of Adam alayhi salam and humanity? قال أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Adam his vicegerent on earth. What a divine mission. What a great burden to carry this divine trust to the entire humanity since the beginning of our responsibility in history. This is the divine drama before we enter the human drama. The Malaika raised out of curiosity and foresight a very interesting response to the divine selection of Adam. They say, our Lord, our Master, we look into the future and we don't see things in good light. Perhaps the Malaika anticipated how humanity will shed blood, how humanity will enslave the weak, how humanity will destroy nature. Isn't this a legitimate reflection and response by the angels in that divine drama? It reminds me of Will Durant, the great historian, who in 1968 wrote about the Malaika's response, but in a historical and contemporary perspective. He said, and I'll open this for our discussion as well in the future as we interact. He said in his book, The Lessons of History, in the past 3,242 years of recorded history, only 268 years have seen no war. Isn't this a confirmation of the Malaika's concerns, my dear brothers and sisters? As you know, in World War II, which lasted for around 6 years, more than 50 million people were killed. Let's go before the World War II, in the same European context, the 30 Years' War in Central Europe, which started in the year 1618 and ended in the year 1648. It started as a conflict between the Protestant and the Roman Catholics, and it slowly expanded and emerged as a power struggle between the European powers. The result was 8 million fatalities. How do we explain إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً in light of these facts, my dear brothers and sisters? Is this a pipe dream? Is it a utopia that's hanging in the air between the heavens and the earth? Or is there positive ground to recover our hope and our faith in that human being who will show the master of leading the world towards the good? Let me share with you some of the positive achievements of humanity that help us understand إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to us, I know what humanity is capable of, despite its fragilities, despite its faults, despite its weaknesses. There is something positive, there is something hopeful that we will discover in this human being who is the inheritor of Adam alayhi salam. Think with me of the abolishment of slavery in the 19th century. Isn't this a profound example of إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ? Isn't Allah vouching for our goodness? And I honestly find it sometimes very surprising to realize how we as humans can belittle and downplay our goodness when Allah not only turns to the Malaika but is turning to Adam and saying to him, I know your goodness and I know what you are capable of. So how do we recover the meaning of Khalifa in light of all these contradictions, my dear brothers and sisters? I think the lesson we learn from this first meaning of Khalifa is that we need to learn from our mistakes despite falling into our weaknesses. Whether at a societal level, civilizational level, or individual and interpersonal level. Montesquieu was one of the children of the Enlightenment age in Europe who read about the 30 Years' War. Let me give you an example of how Montesquieu expressed إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. He once said, and he was an enlightened judge as well as a political philosopher, he said, if one day I find something that is useful to me but harmful to my family, I would reject it in my mind. But if I one day find something that is useful to my family but is harmful to my country, I will forget about it. And one day, if I find something that is useful to Europe but is harmful to humanity, I will consider it an official crime. Why, Montesquieu? Because I am human by nature and French by accident. Isn't this an example of the Khalifa of Allah walking on earth, learning from the mistakes, learning from the reality checks to make the world a better place? Let me introduce to you the second meaning of إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً, and I will conclude. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to participate in the creative reproduction of this world. Allama Iqbal, in his book, The Secrets of the Soul, Asrar Khudi, he mentions a beautiful example of how Allah wants us to be the co-workers in redesigning creatively this raw world which He gave us. Allama Iqbal says, "Oh Allah, You made the night, but I made the lamb. Oh Allah, You made the clay, but I made the cup. You made the mountains, the deserts, and the forests, but I made the parks, the gardens, and the flower beds. Oh Allah, I created out of the stone a mirror. Oh Allah, You created the stone. Oh Allah, You gave me this power to be a creator with You. فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ." My dear brothers and sisters, we have this responsibility to be the creative representatives of Allah in earth. Are we able to express this today? This is already happening across the world, where designers are beginning to articulate and display the notions of social justice, ecological justice, through exhibiting these principles in the form of public images. I will finish off on this note and pass it back to Sheikh al-Dehnawi to introduce the passages of Brother Hassan Lami about Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذ ابتلى إبراهيم ربه بكلمات فأتمهن قال إني جاعلك للناس إماما قال ومن ذريتي قال لا ينال عهد الظالمين.
صلى على محمد وصلى على محمد. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Again, our apologies for the technical issues and for the delay in starting the program. I would like to thank Sheikh for his beautiful recitation and Muhammad for your insightful comments about the creation of Adam alayhi salam. And please don't forget to comment. We don't want this to be a lecturing style, rather we want it to be a dialogue as it's happening between us, and also we want to take it on an online platform. So leave us with your questions and comments. So if you look at Surah Al-Baqarah, we started with the 3 types of religiosity from verse 1 to about 20. Then we started the divine realm And then it went to human drama, which is expressed in the Qawm Bani Israel, which we explained last time. Now, Quran gives us an example to the people who claim that they are following the footsteps of Ibrahim. The Qawm Bani Israel, which is just an example in the history. Now it can apply also to us as Muslims, or to any free thinker in the world. So now in the sequence of Surah Al-Baqarah, Ibrahim comes as a role model. And we see in the entire Quran, Ibrahim is a role model. So from verse 124 to verse 141, which is about 18 verses, it's about Ibrahim and his work and his role modelship. Why? Because Bani Israel claim that they are following the footsteps of Ibrahim a.s. and of that lineage. So multiple attributes of Ibrahim is represented. But what I want to focus on is the open-mindedness of Ibrahim as opposed to closed-mindedness of Bani Israel, who wanted everything to be for themselves, such as salvation. Like the issue of salvation is discussed in verse 62, which I call it the salvation pluralism. The pluralism of salvation is explained in verse 62 as a statement of opposition to the claim of the Jewish tribe, which is, I said, it's just an example in the history. Bani Israel, it can be the Muslim who claim salvation to be exclusive to them, so on and so forth. So Ibrahim comes with that open-mindedness as opposed to closed-mindedness that we see in that religious community being expressed. So now the question is, what is open-mindedness?
I think it's a vague term, Brother Lamy. Does open-mindedness mean that we should take on all the positions out there?
Exactly, so that's the question. I hope that our audience and viewers can comment as well. What is the term open-mindedness? What is the term closed-mindedness? So we can provide multiple definitions, but here we want to go to these verses and find the Quranic definition of open-mindedness. So in Quran, when we look at Ibrahim a.s., 3 steps or threefold definition is provided for open-mindedness. At the level of the thoughts, at the level of the articulation and talks and speech, and then at the level of behavior and conduct. At the level of thoughts, who is an open-minded person? Ibrahim shows us that if at the level of thought and ideology you're free from titles, you're not contained within a tag. I belong to this school of thought. This is Muslim, this is Jewish, this is Christian, this is Sunni, this is Shia. So all you carry is a tag, but not the substance. Ibrahim teaches us he's neither from the east nor from the west. He's neither Jewish nor Christian. He is a submitter to the truth. So at the level of the thought, you are someone who is free from tags, from the notion of titles, and from the notion of associating yourself to these racial discriminatory terms, if it is permitted to describe it as that. Number 2, at the level of the thought, you are futuristic. You don't think about yourself, your community. You think about the future generations. A simple example now is the issue of the climate change. Are we thinking about the future generations? Ibrahim says an open-minded person is a person who thinks beyond his time, beyond her time, beyond the place that they are living, rather they look into the future. So these are at least 2 characteristics of someone who is open-minded from a Quranic perspective, at the level of the thought, at the level of the ideology. Now when we come down to the talk, your talk should be inclusive. Your talk should be in a way that includes everyone, that promotes safety, security and well-being in the community. Sometimes the way we talk, the way we articulate ourselves, it just creates more insecurity, more trouble, more fear within our family, within our community, within the wider society, and so on and so forth. So an open-minded person is someone who basically at the level of the talk is inclusive, at the level of the articulation is thinking about the safety, about the security and well-being of human being. And finally, about the behavior. The behavior of someone who is open-minded as opposed to closed-mindedness is someone who is Hanif. Hanif is someone who is constantly going towards the truth, as opposed to Janif or Janafa, which is antonym to Hanafa. Hanif is someone who is always struggling on the path of truth. Because we can be, in terms of our thinking, in terms of our, the way we express ourselves, maybe we're open-minded. But when it comes to our actions, we are the most closed-minded people. In what way? In excluding others. In the way that we know this is the truth, but we don't adhere to it. We don't promote that notion. So, to summarize, Ibrahim is a role model to tell religious communities how to be open-minded at three levels. The thoughts, at the level of the thoughts, try to be free from tags, free from titles, and be futuristic. At the level of the behavior, be inclusive. Think about the safety and the security of the community. And at the level of the behavior, care about the truth. If you know something is the truth, do that work. Try to promote it. Try to advocate it, and inshallah we can be followers of Ibrahim alayhi salam.
Thank you, the Brother Hassan Lami, for your insightful commentary and practical explanation. We will now move to Sheikh Muhammad al-Dihnawi to introduce the ayat about As-Safa and Marwa in the context of Hajar alayhi salam.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون إن الصفا والمروة من شعائر الله فمن حج البيت أو اعتمر فلا جناح عليه أن يطوف بهما ومن تطوع خيرا فإن الله شاكر عليم.
Thank you, Sheikh Muhammad, for this beautiful recitation of the Holy Quran. We will commence part 2 with my brief insights around the passages relating to Hajar alayhi salam. As we said last night, the running themes of Surah Al-Baqarah are focused on the notion of election, instruction, and test or examination. We know that at the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala critically reviewed to us the 3 types of religiosities we spoke about last night, al-mu'minun, al-kafirun, al-munafiqun, he made reference to one particular important aspect of receiving guidance, and that is living in harmony with your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. And this is an example best exemplified by al-mu'minun, who live in this state of tranquility and serenity. And we also touch base on al-munafiqun and how they are unwilling to use their intellect and think for themselves. As soon as we conclude from the context of these three types of religiosities, Allah shifts to Himself in addressing humanity. Ya ayyuhan nas a'budu rabbakum, to teach us that He is our ultimate teacher, and that we need to be willing to receive guidance beyond the confines of our identity, of our labels, of our traditions, of our cults. After that, we witness the emergence of a number of nations. We move into the societal context. Brother Hassan yesterday mentioned the people of Israel. And before speaking about As-Safa wal Marwa, the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah mentions how the Muslim nation in Medina received the privilege of becoming the middle nation. But this is not the end of the story, my dear brothers and sisters. A middle nation is not the final point in determining whether this nation will succeed in upholding its values. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does is He looks back to history and allows us to reflect on a lady whom no social recognition was given, no societal privilege was given, no societal respect was expressed. Hajar alayhi salam, a black slave who is left in the valleys of Mecca alone with her child Ismail, in a lifeless city which has not become a city yet but will become, because of her sense of struggle and sense of perseverance, trust and hope. It was Mecca which will become later the host of the Rifada.
Isn't that interesting? In a patriarchal society 1,000 years ago, a lady who is from an African background is given that status and given that notion, and she is considered with these two, with Safa and Marwa, one of the Sha'air. It's very interesting to have this notion being expressed in Surah Al-Baqarah in order for the Muslims to take lessons from this lady in the history.
Absolutely, Dr. Hassan. And I think the name Hajar is very telling. Is willing to migrate beyond the concepts of race, the concepts of social class, the concepts of patriarchal domination, even the concept of victimization. She finds herself in the middle of the valleys of Mecca, and she strives to become the example of what Eric Fromm terms the biophilic type, the type that is looking at this world before the afterworld and striving to make this world flourish by looking for the source of life, which is water. She knows that her son is in need of that water, but she knows that humanity will realize that her striving will become the example of hope, even in the most bleak of circumstances. Allah says, Inna Safa wal Marwa min sha'airillah. The word sha'air is very interesting in the sense that it comes from the same root as the word shi'ar, emblem or sign that signifies a particular meaning. As if the Quran is teaching us a lesson that if you wanted to know the true emblem, the true sign of being a successful nation, you need to look at the example of this black slave in the history. She rushes from as-Safa, which signifies the purity, the mirror of that biophilic heart, vision and emotion towards the world and her son and her family, to the Marwa, which gives us the meaning of muru'ah, the chivalry, the honor, the generosity, the love, the passion. Now you are not circling around the Kaaba, which takes you back, as Dr. Ali Sharihati says, to point zero. But you are now running towards a destination, a clear destination that is Al-Marwa. From As-Safa to Al-Marwa 7 times, which is an odd number, but a number that opens up great lessons even for people such as Nelson Mandela. It reminds me of George Frederick Watts, the great British painter and sculptor in the 19th century, who came up with a beautiful painting titled Hope. And it's interesting, my dear brothers and sisters, that the first woman in history to exemplify the hope needed for humanity today is the same woman that was portrayed in the artistic painting by a non-Muslim who does not probably know anything about Hajar. Watts, in his portrayal of the young blinded woman sitting slumped over a globe or the planet, she is blindfolded. She is holding a broken musical instrument with one string. That she is very self-determined to play the music despite her blindness, despite her inability to play this musical instrument because of the one string. Nelson Mandela, the great South African leader, in his Robben Island prison cell, had a reproduced copy of this painting titled Hope hanging on the wall. Every morning he would look at it. Every morning he would contemplate on its meanings. And he would say to himself, injustice will never last forever. What we learn from Hajar alayhi salam, from Watts's painting titled Hope, and from Nelson Mandela, is that even in the most bleak of times, even in the most difficult of times, we have to be mindful of not falling into a cynical attitude towards life, where there is an atmosphere of dissatisfaction, an atmosphere of complaint, but rather be like Hajar alayhi salam, who is willing to persevere and strive so that the water comes out and brings life, to turn Mecca into a city. As Jalaluddin al-Rumi once said, the human seed falls in the ground like a bucket into a well where Yusuf alayhi salam is. It grows and comes up full of unimagined beauty. Isn't this an example of how As-Safa wal Marwa give us the emblem that makes us feel the virtues, as the School of Virtue Ethics, which Dr. Hassan Lami is an expert in, teaches us? It does not give us, the sha'air don't give us the moral rules and laws, because even good people and bad people do know the morals. They know intellectually this is bad and this is good, but virtue ethics is telling us you need to feel the virtues. You need the emotions in order not to forget the virtues. And this emotion and feeling is best exemplified in the sha'air of As-Safa wal Marwa. I will pause here and go back to His Eminence Sheikh Muhammad al-Dihnawi to recite Brother Lami's final part on the notion of moral compass in Surah Al-Baqarah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب ولكن البر من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر والملائكة والكتاب والنبيين وآتى المال على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل والسائلين وفي الرقاب وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة والموفون بعهدهم إذا عاهدوا والصابرين في البأساء والضراء وحين البأس أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد.
Thank you, Sheikh. So, in Quran, as Al-Ghazali says, there are gems, there are jewels. And as other scholars say, Quran has foundational verses, meaning there are verses in Quran which forms the foundation of the entire Islamic thought. If we find these verses, then we will be able to understand the entire worldview of Quran and understand the rest of the verses through these verses. I think verse 177 is one of those verses, because it provides us with the moral compass, with the moral caliber for which we need to live. Because if you look at the philosophy of ethics, we have three major schools of thought. I'm not going to go through it tonight because it requires a separate session. But you have virtue ethics, you have deontology, Kantian ethics, and you have consequentials. Quran provides a moral theory as well, which I think is somewhere between virtue ethics and deontology, but it's more on the virtue ethics. This verse tells us how to live a moral life. And if you are looking at it from a philosophy of ethics, it starts with meta-ethics, meaning provides us with the foundation from which we need to form an objectivity, then to the next level, which is normative ethics, where we have the moral rules and regulations in order to live, the moral virtues. This verse is composed of 10 parts. And what is interesting, it starts with the word bir. We discuss open-mindedness from perspective of Ibrahim. Bir is a virtue which reflects open-mindedness. Because we have similar words as well, al-bar. Al-bar is the desert, the plain, because it has an open horizon. Al-bor is the wheat, because wheat was the source of nutrition and life. Al-bir is a type of good and virtue which reflects this open-mindedness, this open heart towards others, towards humanity, towards nature and everything. Now, Quran says bir is neither Eastern nor Western. If you put in the context of the verses, it's because when the Qibla was changed. Because Mecca was to the east of the Muslims living in Medina, and Jerusalem was on the west for the Jews. So that's the contextual, but to make it more contemporary, saying that there is no civilizational war, as it was claimed, that there is clash of civilizations. Because goodness and virtue does not belong to East or West. It is beyond this closed-mindedness. Again, another definition provided. What is goodness? Provides us with 10 steps, which we can divide it into 3 categories. Category number 1 is the ideological perspective, which has 5 sections. Category number 2 is the social perspective, which has 4 sections. And the last one is the individual aspect. So I try to go through it as quick as I can. So the first part, which forms this moral compass and moral caliber, is the theological, ideological aspect, which basically tells us Amana Billah, the belief in God, which we explained. It is where the meaning is derived. This is answering the existential question of where we come from. Then Wal Yawm al-Akhir, the existential question, where we're going to end up, provide us with objectivity of ethics and actions. Our actions are not vain. Every action has some ramifications in our life, whether we see it now or later in life. Then Wal Malaika, which we explained as well. There are hidden forces in the world. There are miracles in the world that we cannot deny. Things happen out of nowhere. And then Al-Kitab, the books that we need to acknowledge. Wal Nabiyyin, the prophets that came with instructions. You can see already is broadening the horizon of Muslims, that this you should believe in all the prophets. La nufarriqu baynahum. You should not differentiate between them. They all are the teachers of this school, the school of humanity, and you need to respect it. So now from this moral compass, you form the background, you form the foundation, the belief in God, the belief in hereafter, the belief in the hidden forces of the world, the belief in the books, and the belief in the prophets. Now, after that goes at the societal level, the social level. The first thing is the al-mal, because the society requires this compassion, brotherhood, sisterhood, and unity. And one of the first things to show that compassion is through spending money, through charitable works, which is meaningful, and has to be something that you love. Ala hubbihi. You love it, but you give it away. And Quran describes 6 groups. We don't have time to go, but when you look at the order of these 6 groups, which is starting from the close family, it goes all the way to people you don't even know. The firriqab, the prisoners, you don't even know them, but you have to exercise charity. It doesn't have to be a family member from same faith, same community, same society, same country. As long as it's belonging to human kingdom, we have to help. Then what iqam as-salah, meaning this society which is showing this compassion, now they have to face constantly in a collective manner, make everything a divine manifestation. Ita is zakah, which is a bit more specific than at al-mal, because zakah is prescribed. And then al-mufuna bi'ahdihim, those who uphold promises, those who if they make a promise, they fulfill it, and that's a sign of trust. Now at the end, at an individual level, and it is very interesting, Quran, in describing its moral compass and moral theory, how to live our life, picks on one virtue, which I personally pondered upon. Why this virtue was sabirin? It's very interesting. Why the virtue of patience? There is a book called Emotional Freedom by Judith Orloff, an American psychiatrist, who describes the virtue of patience as emotional liberation. She says that on a daily basis we face all these emotional disturbances. But to understand patience, we need to understand what's opposite to patience, and that's frustration. She says, frustration is a feeling of agitation and intolerance triggered when your needs are not met. It is tied to an inability to delay gratification, especially in the age of technology. We want immediate results. Someone sends a message, as soon as you see the 2 ticks on WhatsApp, you want a response. Few seconds. If you don't get the response, you judge. So now we understand frustration, patience comes into play. What does she say about patience? You can drive yourself crazy. When you feel frustrated, you can drive yourself crazy. Behave irritably. Feel victimized. Or try to force an outcome which are self-defeating reaction that alienate others and bring out the worst in them. Or you can learn to transform frustration with patience. In another part of the book she says, it is an emotionally freeing practice of waiting, watching, and knowing when to act. It is a form of compassion, reuniting to intuition, a way to emotionally redeem your center in a world filled with frustration. So we understand why Quran picks amongst all the virtues the virtue of patience, and says that patience towards what? Al-Ba'sa, which are referring to problems which come from outside, such as flood, such as a loved one passes away, such as earthquake, natural disasters. Al-Dharra, which are problems from within, such as depression, such as sickness, such as anxiety, and Hain al-Ba's, which is more specific to the time of wars and to the time of basically when things are not stable in a community or society. And then Quran says that by this moral compass you become muttaqi, meaning someone who internally self-regulates, and someone who's a sadiq, honest person. So honesty is not simply saying honest words, but being honest to yourself, to your thoughts, to your emotions, so on and so forth, which is very hard. It's not that easy. So there is more to this verse, but I would ask our audience, please share your thoughts about what is the moral compass that you follow. What do you think is the moral compass of the Quranic world? As Quran, we are expressing as the book of the world. So this verse is telling us first you need to have the ideology. Have you thought about what is your backbone to the way you act, to the way you behave? Now you have the backbone. How do you behave? At the level of the society with the other, and at the individual level towards yourself.
We come to the conclusion of tonight's session, my dear brothers and sisters. I will summarize the key learnings of tonight in two statements. The first is by the great Goethe, who described the Quran as the book of the world. The German poet and scholar, who once said, and he summarizes the lessons from part 1, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً, as well as the ideal example of Ibrahim. If we take man as he is, we make him worse. But if we take him as he should be, we make him become what he can be. And the second lesson from part 2, I would summarize it as follows. Hajar alayhi salam and the moral compass in action teach us to know the worst and work for the best. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.